All right, guys. Hey, welcome to another episode of Mediocre Dads. I'm your host, Queon. I go by Q, of course. And on this episode of Mediocre Dads, I am joined by another in-person guest. And so you guys know, if you've been keeping up with Mediocre Dads, that I've had one other in-person guest, technically. No, two. Two in-person. I've had two in-person guests. So this would be my third. And so as I say almost every episode, the goal and the intent with Mediocre Dads is to grow, get more people here, and to really just make a community. So, I'm happy he's here. A little bit about him, how we met, right? So his name is James, and I met him at the gym. So crazy story and how we met. Essentially, I'm filling out the gym paperwork, and he comes in and he's talking to the young lady at the counter who's helping me out, having a little conversational back and forth. I hear some things that, as believers, that we automatically know, like, oh, that's yep, that's a believer right there. You get certain phrases, certain things, you hear, you're like, oh, that's a believer right there. And then next thing you know, a conversation took off and exchanged numbers, and now here we are. So I'm excited to have him on. I'm excited to have him on as a guest, and for you guys to get to hear his story about his books that he wrote, books that he's writing, and everything that comes with it, and all that. But without further ado, James, please introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first off, thanks for having me. My name is James Charles Bogan Jr., the full name, and that's basically what's on my book. I served 30 years in the United States Army. In that time frame, without a break of service, it was a mixture of active Army, active Guard reservists for the active time, and then 4 years as a reserve soldier. So I got to experience every aspect of that. And I served in different capacities, different MOSs or occupations. I was a platoon sergeant, training NCO, and the last thing was a first sergeant at the rank of E7. I was working in that capacity, and that was really a blessed moment for me. I'm also a minister of the gospel, so the book is entitled, How Did We Get Here, and What Does God Say About It? And basically, I attacked it differently than most. It's an easy-to-read book. It has 5-star ratings, and it's located wherever books are sold. It's even translated into South Korean, which I didn't even know.
That's awesome.
And that's awesome. That's a blessing from God right there.
Yeah.
So basically, the first chapter is Why Must Soldiers Die? Because we have a high suicide rate in all branches. I get to the root cause of things, and it's only 14 chapters, but it's 3 to 5 pages a chapter. So it's an easy read. And it's the way I'm talking to you now is exactly the way I wrote the book. So as a minister of the gospel, I give you my perspective. Then I say, okay, what does God say about it? I break the scriptures down. Then we have a conclusion. I also have a question and answer before the conclusion, and that's pretty much it. So like I say, go out. If you go to Amazon and just type in my name, James C. Bogan with 2 G's, Boggan, the book will come up. Just read the reviews. It's very powerful. So God is really blessing me with that. I'm also a songwriter. I have a recording studio, a DJ thing. I want to start scratching gospel and doing all this great stuff.
That's awesome.
And it's a lot of fun, but I also I have awards for calling cadence. I sing the cadences and write them or make them up as I go, whatever is popular. One of the jobs I held was field artillery with 110 men for 3.5 years, and it was known as a cohort unit. So when you get 110 of us running side by side, they sound like thunder coming. And they were hyped. So I really missed that part of it. But we're not here to talk about my total career. We're here to talk about leadership. And I'm going to turn it back over to the host, and whatever questions he have, then we will get into our discussion. I don't know how it works, whether they have a way to send you something and say, hey, what about this question here or that question here? Or is it something we answer later?
Yeah, we can have what ends up happening is usually people comment below if they have questions, and then we get into it. And I'm always for it. I've had several people comment before, and I've been able to answer. So when the video comes out, which video will be coming out tonight, so we're not necessarily live right now, like on anything. You'll be seeing this video on what is today? The 16th. Yep. You'll be seeing it tonight, Thursday. It's going to be released, and right after we're done here. And so I want to do this because it's better quality for you guys. But yeah, no. So kind of jumping right into it, right? So you did 30 years in the military, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to first talk about leadership. And so For me, I've been in the Army for 10 plus years, going on 11,
Hmm.
and my leadership style and the how I lead has been developing since I joined, right? Because based off my experiences, the people I've come across, and whatever the case might be, and that has helped me translate into being a dad as well, and that leadership in the home. But for my first question to you would be, not like necessarily a board style question, but what is leadership to you, and what does that look like, right? Because you've had those 30 years in the military, and obviously there's a big military presence out there, and we all know what leadership is in many different facets. But what is leadership to you?
Based on what I've learned, and I've experienced good leadership as well as bad, and some of the things that I brought out in that first chapter, Why Must Soldiers Die? When you have bad leadership, it's usually somebody in a high ranking position, but not seasoned enough to handle the responsibilities, nor do they care about those that they're leading.
Mm,
So a lot of times they act like you know how kids are when they grow up and they're bullied or whatever. Somebody took their lunch money. Now it's their turn. They have the power, so they're going to really stick it to you and not care. Or
mhm.
they're in a rush to make rank or move up to the point they'll step on anybody to get there.
Yup.
These are all the bad traits of a bad leader. And like I said, I've experienced both. The difference between that and a good leader, normally a good leader is somebody that don't desire to be in a leadership position. And if they're humble enough, you can mold them. But unfortunately, in 1991, right after the Gulf War, when they decided to downsize the military, they made a threat to everybody that had anything derogatory in their records that they were going to put them out. So they basically said, hey, you either get out on your own or we're going to put you out and you don't even get a retirement. And the floodgates opened. Well, what that did was cause a vacuum because all of the older veterans that was pouring into the youth was no longer available. So now you have youth growing up through the ranks without being properly seasoned and abusing their authority because they're spoiled. They didn't get enough time to really learn what it is, like the three-legged stool, to take care of the mission, the family, and the soldier. We all know that when you take care of a soldier and you show concern for their families, they will achieve any mission you give them. Matter of fact, they'll exceed your expectations. And I had a general, 1 star. He was conducting a training at the brigade level. So he had all of his battalion XOs and training NCOs there. And the very first thing he said was, not everybody is meant to be a leader. He
Understand.
said, if your attrition rate is more than 3%, which accounted for people that are PCSing or retiring, I can show you a poorly led unit where morale is low. And anytime you have more low morale, this is when mistakes are made. This is when people are committing suicide. I mean, it's just total chaos. Don't nobody want to stay in the military or serve in the military if your first tour of duty or your second tour of duty is with a person that's ill equipped to be a leader. So these are some of the differences that I've experienced firsthand as to what goes on when you have someone that in a leadership position and not either seasoned or in the position because they have academics and time in service.
Oh man, talking about those officers, purely just, I went to college, so then, and I went to OCS, and they said I was a leader, and it's like, it requires a little bit more. And I think I completely agree. First and foremost, I completely agree. And what that general said, that not everybody's meant to be a leader. But what the military is really good at doing is selling the idea that anybody can be a leader.
I don't have a problem with that if you can pour out a person and rebuild them.
Okay.
If their cup is half full, that statement is true.
Mm-hmm.
Because there have been times where, for instance, when I was the platoon sergeant and I had tractors in my platoon, I had a young lady that was an E4, and the fellas would come to me and they would be upset. They were like, "Look, she's not towing the line. She's getting paid the same as us. She had little fingernails. She was a little prissy, but she had to get out there and do her job like everybody else." So I pulled her aside, gave her a noogie, and I told her, "Look, you're gonna have to tighten up." She wanted to be my best doggone driver. She didn't care about the nails no more. She went out there, she would bind her stuff down, rotate tires. She was doing all of that stuff on that rig. So you never know what somebody can do. Remember, seeds are planted. God is the one that gives increase. And a lot of times what I've learned is what the problem in the military and in leadership, period, is when we decide we'll go ahead and do it ourselves instead of taking the time to train you, because it takes more effort and time to do that. It's quicker if I do it and just get it done. I can get it done in 30 minutes, but it's going to take me 3 hours to pour into you so that when I leave, whether I retire or PCS, you know how to carry on the job. That's one of the things I learned as I was coming up in the ranks that was starting to be missing, because everybody's like, time sensitive. Everything got to be done like yesterday. Okay, so if everything is on a timetable and we're rushing everything, when are we going to develop soldiers? When are we going to bless the next generation and actually pour into them the foundation that they're going to need to stand on when going to war?
Yeah, man. Well, and so I agree, right? Like, yes, there are soldiers who have the ability, the capabilities to be good leaders or leaders for that part. One of the things that frustrated me and or still frustrates me to this day is I come across, senior NCOs who've made it to a position, because I tell soldiers all the time, you stay anywhere long enough, you're bound to be the boss one day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, but for some of these people, that's all it is for them. They are just here. They've been here long enough where they're in the position they're in, but they don't have any of the. They never ever took the time to learn the small things to now, when it comes to the big things, they're capable and able to lead other soldiers and others to do what is required or what is necessary and how to properly do that. All right. And so that's kind of my biggest thing, my stipulation, kind of what you were talking about, where you mentioned during Gulf War, and they kind of create this vacuum, and you have all these leaders who they made it there too fast.
Correct.
And there was never a really crawl, walk, run phase. It was straight from crawling to running.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, that's okay. They're able to figure it out, right? And it's going to take some few mistakes. For other people, they never get past that phase of I can't keep up, if you know what I mean.
Well, and that leads to when I was a first sergeant and we had a E5 that was backfilling for an E6, and it was multiple companies' supply. You needed to be a professional supply sergeant that's seasoned to deal with that kind of load when you got certain units PCS and going overseas to war and coming back, and now you're rotating all of this stuff. The accountability was a headache.
Yeah.
So this E5, it was much more than that E5 can handle. Mentally, that joker would literally throw itself down the steps. I mean, It was crazy. So I understand that, but I would also say this. There's a difference between a non-commissioned officer and a sergeant.
Yes.
There's a difference. So a sergeant is someone that gets pushed up through the rank, whether it's through fault of their own or their lack of effort or their incompetence or whatever. They got book smarts. They served their right time. And now, like you say, eventually you're going to get put in a position of authority. But the difference between the two, a non-commissioned officer takes charge. A non-commissioned officer is going to show up early and going to be the last one to leave. They're going to make sure that they're checking on their soldiers, their troops, their families. They're going to do everything that a non-commissioned officer should do according to the creed and according to the oath that they took. A sergeant is just somebody that has stripes sitting in that position, and they can be incompetent. They can be sorry. They're getting paid good money, and they're not really engaging because their vision is, what do I need to do to get my next stripe? Mm-hmm. Or they're incompetent and in over their head. And instead of them humbling themselves and asking for help, a lot of times the help that they need is within the squad that they're in charge of. But because they don't look deep enough, the squad can see you for who you really are. That's why me as a platoon sergeant, I tell people quick, I get lost going across the street. So you give me a Blue Force track, send me overseas. Hey, look, come here, buddy. You know this stuff. Sit here. I may be in charge, but we gonna get back because you're gonna make sure we gonna get back.
Yeah, right. Oh, man.
So the whole point of being in leadership, to go full circle, is humility, understanding that you don't know everything. And that's okay. We live in a society where if you lose or if things don't go your way, there's something wrong with you. And that's not the truth. Unfortunately, that helps with people wanting to kill themselves, or it helps to get more of the same. When we're talking bad leaders make bad leaders.
Yep.
I had an officer, a warrant officer told me a story. He said there was a first sergeant that wanted some kind of spreadsheet, and he had a young soldier that was a guru at Excel. He could make that Excel do anything you wanted to do. But because the first sergeant was such a pain in everybody's butt, and that's being nice with the wording, he said that the soldier gave him exactly what he asked for, nothing more, nothing less. See, so people can respect your rank and give you what you want. But guess what? What if he had befriended like a family? One thing about a leader, whether you're an officer or enlisted, when you look at soldiers and those that God has put in your care as family, those that are older than you treat them like your grandparents. Those that are your age, you treat them like brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
If you don't have the heart and you don't have this in you, you're going to make a bad leader.
I agree. It's funny because I know there's in the S3 there was this soldier. He's an engineer, so he has his degree in engineering. He's very smart, very smart. And I remember I was like, hey, I'm pretty good with Excel, whatever, but I need to do A, B, and C. And one of the senior NCOs, he's like, oh, I got a guy for that. I was like, what do you mean for that, man? He's like, I got a guy for that. He goes, go in the shop. He's an specialist tomorrow. Tell him what you need in Excel, and he'll have it to you within a few hours. Obviously, he's got some other stuff he's got doing, but like, give him some time, and he'll send it back over to you. So I go in there. I say, hey, man, look, Matt Sergeant sent me over here. He said you could help me out with Excel. He's like, what do you need? I was like, I'm trying to do A, B, and C. He's like, oh, that'll take me a couple minutes. Where you at? And he comes over here, and I'm like, yo, what do you mean? He comes over here. He's like, boop, 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 putting some things in there.
Those formulas, man.
Those formulas, and he goes, yeah, man, when I was in, college, I took an Excel class basically where he's like, they teach you all the formulas, and he goes, and then in my spare time, I've been practicing here and there, but he's like, yeah, man, that's easy. Did it, like I said, a few clicks of the button and you're done. And I was like, oh man, I thought this was going to take you some time. He's like, nah, man, that's really simple. Whenever you need it. So just the small things, right? Of just being able to like you said, humble yourself and say, hey man, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this. Right. But are you able to help me? And a lot of people don't want to do that. A lot of people are afraid of looking dumb, or a fear of people judging them, if you will, for not knowing, when they're like, oh, you should know this. And I'm like,
but here's the thing. And I agree with you. And that's unfortunate. But it also talks about that person and their own insecurities, that they don't even know their worth.
Yeah.
Because I'm like this. I'll tell anybody, I could care less what you think about me, because I'm not living for you. I live for my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So I've learned to accept my flaws. I am not a perfect man by no stretch of the imagination. I never aspired to write a book, let alone 5. I never. That wasn't on my bucket list to do. And at 57 years old, just to be an author, and I'm talking about becoming a DJ and preaching and singing and all of this stuff, that's God.
Yeah.
So when you really understand who God is in your life and you take him with you, then you're not tossed to and fro wherever the wind blows with the culture of this world, and you don't look to the culture of this world for validation.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? So that's why the devil can easily just take people off the face of the earth, whether you're in the military, and everything that we're talking about now, although we're talking about military, all these principles apply when you get out the military, because in the civilian sector, it's even worse.
Oh, yeah.
One good thing about the military, as broke as it is, because it's only as good as those that are humble, those that have integrity, character, and morals, and actually care. At least we all have the uniform code of military justice. We all know we're going to wear a uniform. It's only so far you're going to go with the disrespect. Brother, there's no filter out here in this world.
Oh, no, there's no
filter. I mean, I'm telling you, you just got to really girt yourself up and be prepared for all kind of things when you get out, because you walk away from a lot. And that's some of the things I miss, because I retired in it was the 30th of April of 2017, according to the VA. So I really miss the camaraderie. I miss the military leadership. I miss the military family. But at the same time, I make family here, because I'm constantly doing Bible study and just fellowshipping with other brothers and sisters in Christ. But it's definitely different when you're talking about military.
Well, so I'm keeping kind of that leadership track, right? I wanted to kind of transition to leadership as a father. So are you a father?
I am.
And how many kids do you have?
Just one.
Just one. Boy or girl?
Boy.
Okay. And so I imagine, how old is he?
He's 14.
14? Okay.
But he lived with his mom now in Arizona, and they just came back from 7 years in China. They went to Africa. She liked to teach abroad. As a matter of fact, she's been accepted in Japan.
Oh, wow.
Okinawa. So I don't know when I'll see. I plan to go and see them right before they leave, or I'll probably fly over to Japan, because I haven't been there in my travels.
That'd be fun.
But in my other marriage, I had 2 kids that I raised, a boy and a girl, helped raise. So when you're talking about father, and ironically, that's in the second book that's coming out roles of a marriage, what the husband and father is responsible for according to God, as well as the wife and the mother.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain responsibilities, and we were talking about that, like I was telling you, right, in Bible study today, because I have 3 married couples there with kids, some of them married for the second time, the whole 9 yards. And when it comes to leadership in the home, God hold the man responsible for teaching his word and being the ruler of the house. Ruling doesn't mean you're going to beat your chest and treat your spouse like her opinion doesn't matter. You're going to make all the decisions. That's not what God is saying. That's not how Jesus loved the church and gave his life for it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a high order to do it the way God say, as opposed to what you think you ought to be doing based on what you witnessed when you were growing up, certain novels you may have read or what somebody may have told you. I get to the root cause of what God say, because he is the one that you're going to have the answer to when it's all said and done, as to whether or not you did what he said. Because if you ever work in ministry in the church, in which you should, because that's all of us.
Yes.
He says, how can you manage my house if you can't rule your house? Remember, the family came before the church, and the family is the foundation for the community. We just got through talking about leadership. Well, the military can't take anything and build anything from nothing.
Yep.
Normally, the foundation starts at home, where you teach your kids responsibility. You give them chores. You talk to them about money. You give them an allowance. You got to do all of these things at home so that they know how to act when they get in public. And then when they join the military or they go off to college, they don't lose their rabbit mind. They know how to say, yes, sir, no, ma'am. They know where to be on time. You got to teach all of this stuff at home. Right now, the society is ruined with kids not having proper home training. And that has nothing to do with both parents or just one parent, because I'm a son of a one parent family. My mom raised me, my brother, and my sister. My dad was not there for that. So if I can accomplish all of these things through God and grace, then there is no excuse for anybody else to say it can't be done. Now, it's a challenge, because a lot of times you see stuff on TV where the father's throwing the football to the son and all of these things. That kind of stuff still hurt, because I oftentimes say, well, maybe I could have played professional football. I was pretty fast. I had height. I could have been a safety or a corner, a wide receiver.
Right.
That didn't work out too well. I tried that. I hit the hole back in my day. They didn't have the common sense to make sure you were equally in size. I hit the hole with a big lineman. That joker rung my bell.
I didn't want to play. I did not want to play football. My brother did. He was a linebacker, and he lived for just lighting people up. And I was like, yeah, see, you're the reason why I don't do that. Because I have been hit by you, and I'm not gonna lie, it doesn't feel good. And there are people who are bigger and stronger than you, and I imagine that's not gonna feel good.
That's
and
it.
I'm fast, but so are they. So I definitely didn't get it. I played basketball, but yeah, no, so you said something I want to push back a little bit. All right. So you mentioned, and not necessarily push back in a negative way, but just kind of have a dialogue about it. But
Okay.
you mentioned about, that, it's not impossible to be raised by a single parent. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you. I totally agree with you. It's not impossible, but it requires a lot of effort in being a person that's willing to accept the challenge. Now, I believe that, and I think most people do foundationally do believe this as well. Obviously, things may they don't always go as planned, but I believe, a 2-parent household is setting up kids for the best possible success they can have. Now, and I'll let you interject here in a second. Okay. And it's not to say that just because you come from a single parent household, that you can't be successful or you won't be as successful as other kids. It's just that we are, by not having a 2-parent household, the potential for those kids to fail is greater than those who are coming from a dual parent household. And so that is, I try to stress especially to dads, right, that it's really easy to have sex with a person and then just leave and be like, man, I'm good, whatever the case might be, and never come back, and because you don't want that responsibility. But being a man requires, and especially a man of God, and believing that you have a responsibility. Now, shouldn't be doing that the deed before marriage anyway, get to know this other person. But that being said, most of what culture tells us is okay to go out and sleep with anybody we want and damn the consequences. So not getting too delved into that topic, but with what I said there, right, with the 2-parent household, I don't think it's impossible. I think it's just a challenge. And one of the leading, or not leading, but one of the best examples for me in my mind that come to my mind is Dr. Ben Carson. Ben Carson, his mom raised both him and his brother. I think they had a sister, but I think it was just, or I don't remember. I think it was just him and his brother. But Ben Carson came from a single parent household. Ben Carson is a brain surgeon, and he completed the very first surgery on conjoined twins. I think they were baby twins. Now the babies ended up passing later on, but the surgery was deemed successful. Right? He's a brain surgeon. He comes from a single parent household. His brother is a surgeon as well. So like, it doesn't mean that it's not possible. And I use that example to tell people, like, it doesn't mean it's not possible. It just means there's a challenge that parent has to be willing to take on. And sometimes most parents are not willing to take on that challenge.
Well, I would say also the culture plays a big role in time frame, because my mom is cut from a different cloth than the single mothers of today. Mm-hmm. Now, when I made the statement, it definitely wasn't to say that double parent household isn't better, mm-hmm. because it takes the pressure off of the one. Yes. So it's definitely better if both are engaged in doing it the way God say do it. Of course, that's what God wanted. That's why he instituted marriage. So that is without saying. But when I hear anything less than it can be done, that's where I draw the line. And that's why I took the posture that I did, because I'm living proof that I'm not going to let the fact that my dad, I may be hurt that I didn't have somebody to throw the football to, or where my life may have came out different, but look at what I achieved because of God. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. I look at, we got to always factor in the God factor, because when it comes to us, like you say, the deed never should have been done to begin with without being married. And a lot of times that's one of the chapters. Until I say I do, I don't. Mm-hmm. How to date as a Christian.
There we go.
So we need to do it the way God say do it. And then we'll reap the blessings that God have for us and the kids, because blessings are passed down from generation to generation. But when we start doing it the way the world said, like you said, the culture today is on fire. There is no morality anymore. Mm-mm. I mean, I was watching a sitcom because I love superheroes, and it's called The Boys.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I started watching it, and then I quickly stopped watching it because it went from rated G to rated X. And I'm like, we just have no shame.
Yeah.
And I said, how do you take superheroes now and come up with it? And the thing is, they didn't have to do that. They had a good plot. They could have left it clean, and it still would have got attention. It would have done well. So it just goes to show you where the world is and the difference that we're supposed to be as light in this dark world. That's where we have to stand up and say, no, everything is possible through Christ, because I'm here and I'm living proof that those that said I could not make a certain rank, those that say I couldn't stay in the military and tried to put me out before I achieved the 30 years, God said otherwise. So we have to start turning back inward and say, hey, we would like coming to America, say we like the money that jingle, but we prefer the kind that fold. We would like to have 2 parents, but if we only have one, God will help us make it through. Yes. And that's how we have to look at it, because you're right. It is a struggle if that unit is not tight. When I'm talking to mom and those kids, if they're not coming together and they're in it together like these, come hell or high water, we're going to stick together. It's going to be tight. It's going to be rough, but we're going to be there for each other. As long as they have that and they have God, God will help them to make it.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? So, no, I totally agree with you. It is better to have 2 parents, but then somebody may say, well, yeah, my dad used to beat my mom. He was there.
Yep.
Yeah. You see what I'm saying? So they had 2 parents. And how did that turn out?
Yeah.
So we have to also put it in context, because the family that keep God in it is what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Of the world, that's just you based on God's mercy and grace. And you just hope when you met that person at the club or at that bar and y'all done got married, you got little Ray running around and little crib midgets, that it work out for long term. And sometime they get God in it, and it do. We just don't know where anything is going to turn up. It's up to God, and it's up to that individual, those individuals involved with getting God in their life.
I agree. So me and my wife were high school sweethearts, and I met my wife. I was in 7th grade. I was just telling the story last week. I was in 7th grade. She was in 6th grade, and that's how we met. And for the first time, but we went to the same church growing up. It's a bigger church, and so her parents were working. Her dad, both of her parents at the time were working in helping in kids ministry, and so I was familiar with who her parents were and whatever the case. But when we started dating in 2011. But when, we went to church because our parents made us go to church.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward, we get married in 2000. I'm going to be in trouble for this. 2014. There we go. Fast forward, we get married in 2014. And then that for those first few years, we don't have God in our life. Right. And we were having sex before marriage, and we had a few scares and whatever the case might be. But we weren't not when we got married, we were just like, oh, now we're absolved of that sin, if you will, of what we were doing, which we weren't. But still, nonetheless, we were married now, and we weren't living our lives for God because both of us were tired of how much church that we had, because we were going to church because our parents told us to, not going to church because we wanted to. Now, I didn't have that instinct, that belief to go to understand why we were going. And so I bring that up because those first few years, I don't know how many times we mentioned the word divorce to each other. I don't know how many times we were so ready to just be like, bro, I can go back to my her dad has done very well for himself, right? And so I don't know how many times it was almost like I can go back to my parents right now, and there would be no shame in the game. They would take me back in a heartbeat. You know what I mean? And so there was a lot of back and forth and bickering and not really love and not having God in the middle. It wasn't until I really kind of realized, like, I want my relationship with my wife to work. I want it to. She's my wife, and I think, I tell people all the time, God works in mysterious ways. He gave us my first daughter because I think we were really close. If we didn't have our first daughter in 2018, I don't know if we would be where we are today. But by giving me my first daughter, reality set in real quick. And I realized this is why my parents took me to church, because now you have the responsibility of this small human being. You are in charge. God has put you in charge of this small little human being's life, and to make sure they're safe, they're happy, they have food in their bellies, and they do what they need to. And that is when I started to realize, okay, I can't do this by myself. I need my wife, and I need first priority. I need God, but also I need my wife, because that foundation, my parents gave me that foundation, and it was always there. I just I ran away from it because I was like, man, that whole church thing, that whole God thing, that's just for old people. And so that's kind of a little bit my story about how it happened, and how I got to where I am now, where my faith, I like to believe my faith is strong, but I'll be very frank. I do stumble, right? I do stumble in the sense of sometimes I sit there and I'm reading, was it John today? And he's talking about, Jesus feeds 5,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there with he feeds 5,000 with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like, now the Bible says it, Jesus did it, and I believe that. In my heart, I believe it. But part of my living in the world brain says there is no way in hell that is possible. That did not happen. They just trying to pump this man up right now.
One thing I can tell you as a minister is that you will always have the devil trying to sow doubt where you're trying to have faith and believe. I deal with it on a regular basis. It's not going to go anywhere. But one thing I can tell you about God is he will always be with you, and he's going to manifest himself in your life. So that way you can know, because there's certain things. I mean, to be honest with you, I should be dead by now. I shouldn't even be here.
Oh, wow.
I was in California, stationed in Fort Ord at the time in Monterey, California, coming from a club called 20 Grand. I had danced all night. I was extremely tired, fell asleep behind the wheel on those mountains. And, once you go to the base, they tell you about the statistics of these mountains, how don't drink and drive and all this stuff. And God literally woke me up right before I drove off. I was able to catch control of that car, and I was wide awake from that point forward. But that's just one of many different situations where there's no way it can be explained other than God.
Yes.
So, and that's why I just got through telling them in Bible study, You have to live this life for real. And like right now, I've been divorced since April of 2022. The last time I saw my wife was in August, 16 September of that same year. The last time we were intimate was in August of that same year. No woman has been in my house since. That's 20 months, going on 21
Wow.
months. I've been living a celibate life, and all I do is Bible study, the gym, church, and God and the books and my family. That's it. That's the life I live, like a priest. And God is the one keeping me. And let me tell you, at 57 years old, I miss the warm body next to me. I miss the sound of the kids in the house, the dog, and all of these things. It's not that I don't miss those things, because I'm constantly reminded. Like I was telling them, even when Netflix came on, when the kids were real small, I would copy it and say, "Badon." So every time I watch something on Netflix, I'm constantly reminded of what I don't have. But what the devil don't understand is I also remember what I do have and what God is still doing in my life. So I know I'll be married again one day, when that time comes. But for right now, I'm on fire doing what God has called me to do. And I'm a living witness for everybody that say you can't live a righteous life like Job did. Then why are you reading the Bible if you don't believe?
Oh, man, that's true. I mean, and that's the crazy part, right? Like I sit there and I think to myself, I'm like, I read the Old Testament and I read how, the Israelites, man, over and over and over, just like, hey, God fed us in the desert, right, with manna from the sky, manna from heaven, and then how quickly they forgot and said, hey, Aaron, we need something to worship. Look, Moses is up on Mount Sinai. I don't know what he's doing. There's some stuff going on up there, but I don't know what he's doing. He's been gone for a little bit too long. It's been 35 days. I don't know when he's coming back. So we need you to make this gold calf so we can worship, because this is what got us out of Egypt. And I was like, hold on, hold the phone. Did y'all forget that the things he did, he split the sea for you and you walked through it.
On dry land.
And then you have the audacity to say, but this idol right here is what got us through Egypt. Yeah. Oh, no, sir. And I do it sometimes in my daily life where I forget where the things that God has done for me so easily, so quickly. Then I'm, oh, man, yeah, no, I did this on my own. I'm me. And then something in the back, hold on. No, I didn't do that. I did definitely do that. I could not do that on my own accord. I would not be where I am today if I didn't have God.
Well, I used to, like you, it seems like when we read the stories from our past, way back in the Bible days, it's easy to be critical of those that was there.
Oh, yeah.
But then God has a way of showing you ain't no, because I'm like, oh my Lord, because I'm like, you go back to leadership.
Yeah.
Aaron was there.
Yeah, Aaron was the guy.
So how in the world, you're the high priest, how in the world you just gonna go with them and just forget your brother? You got them up there and talking to God, and you think this is what I'm saying. But look at it from this perspective. They didn't even think about the repercussions of what they were doing.
Mm-mm.
I mean, think about it. God get mad. God is the kind of God, he's going to tear your behind out the frame.
Yeah.
And none of that, just build us the calf and, we'll worship this God and we're going to give him all the praise and all the glory. And I'm like, oh my Lord, y'all done lost y'all mind. Because God ain't having it. I'm trying. And that's the thing. That's what's wrong with the church today. We've become a society, even a society where as soon as we started, we take corporal punishments out of schools. So now kids aren't afraid of nobody. They'll tell the teachers where to go, the principal, and everybody else, because we did that. We took prayers out of school. When you look at where the society is now, where they tell the elementary school kids where they're playing sports, everybody get a trophy. Why? Everybody can't be Michael Jordan. Everybody can't be LeBron James. And it's nothing wrong with you not being that. That don't take away from your value. God gave you special skills. Just enjoy the sports, and what they're teaching is teamwork. Just enjoy that. But now all of a sudden, if we don't win, it's rigged. Okay, but you're not going to win every time.
You're not guaranteed.
And see, that's the thing. Just like it's so many things like the church. They don't call out sin no more. Everything is prosperity, love, mercy, and grace. They forget about wrath, jealousy, and the fact that God do punish sin. That's why that's one of the chapters in my book. Mercy and grace versus God's wrath and jealousy. That's one of the chapters in the third book, because we need to go back to understanding that God did not change. Jesus did not change what God had established. Jesus already said, I didn't come to do my will. I came to do my Father's will. And everything I'm showing you, he the one showed me, or he told me. That's it. I ain't changing nothing else. But because Jesus came and did what he did, everybody's now, well, because we're under the new covenant of mercy and grace. Okay, but that don't absolve you of all the sin you're doing. You can't willfully sin just because you say, I sin and I'm saved by grace. Okay, that is not why Jesus just died on the cross and did all that for us.
I tell people all the time, you must have forgot what Paul talked about then, because, oh man, all right. So Paul, especially when you mention the schools, kids, and trophies, right? Paul talks about, he mentions how everyone has their own special gift. Everyone has their own gift. And Paul was quickly to tell people, your gift is not my gift, right? And my gift is not your gift. And he would tell people that, hey, there are others who are better than me at this said thing, and that is their gift. And that what God has told them, that is their gift, and then he wants them. We want to add to, bless it, and let it grow, right? So who am I to get jealous because Timothy is better at talking than I am, right? Or when the reality is that's Timothy's gift. My gift is to be able to speak the word, or not speak the word, but be able to go to create these churches and build these churches up, and whatever the case might be, right? And so Paul, man, so many things come back to I would even say what Paul wrote in his letters to the church when you mentioned the church, right? Where people are like, yeah, you mentioned we're new covenant and mercy and love, and everything's peaceful, and Jesus was just was love. And I was like, yeah, he was. But like, did you also forget when he got mad at the disciples because it was a Roman soldier or a Roman leader, and he came to Jesus and said, hey, the disciples haven't been able to heal my son. He's about to die. Can you do anything? And he looked at them and he said, you have little faith. And then he was like, your son's healed. And obviously, it's shortened the story here, but still, he healed his son. And then by the time he got back, he was like, hey, what's going on? They're like, oh, he's healed. When did this start happening? It was like around this time. He was like, that's when I was talking to Jesus.
Well, a lot of times we don't understand Jesus is because we don't want to live the life that Jesus wants us to live. We still hanging on. We got to remember, we're born in sin and shaped in iniquity. So we are used to just enjoying ourselves. We ain't used to having to deal with total lying for God, because God has standards. And that's another thing that's not happening in the church, because the church right now are not enforcing anything. They've taken the posture that, okay, sin, you're going to sin just as long as you come. The Holy Ghost eventually is going to convict you, and then you're going to change. That's not what Jesus taught, because Jesus called out sin. And the only time Jesus really got angry is when they were having the money changing in the house of his house. And he said, my house will be known as the house of prayer. So he turned over the tables, he made a whip, and he was whipping their behind to get them out of there. Jesus was angry at that point. So if Jesus always called out sin and said, okay, go and sin no more, that's calling out sin. So people shouldn't feel comfortable, because back in the day, you probably remember when you was a kid, if some wino or a young lady that was walking the streets known as a hooker, a prostitute, would come to the church, they would sit in the back. They didn't want to get close to the altar, because that's where they felt the power of God. They respected God. Now they can sit all the way up to the front because ain't nobody calling out nothing. You can just willfully sin. You got people shacking in the church that's got leadership, permanent positions in the church, and none of this is being called out. So in other words, what can we say to the people that are sinners that's not going to church? They're like, why should I go to church? They doing the same thing. Matter of fact, in some cases, that's worse, because the expectation, if you say you're a Christian, people automatically expect you to live a certain way.
Yep.
And that's not happening.
And I've always try to, when I talk about the church, because as a Christian, I tell people I'm a Christian, a believer, and I try to minister to them, if you will. The very first thing that comes out of people's mouth generally is, well, I don't like church, and the church this, the church did this, church did that, and I'm always like, well, that's a piece of it, right? Like, don't get me wrong, going to church has value, and it's an important part of to get that spiritual part of it, that filling of your cup, if you will. But it's not the whole thing. That's not, going to church is not what makes you a Christian, not what makes you a believer, right? That relationship with God is what makes you a believer, right? Because that's who, like you said, that's who he's going to use the Holy Spirit to transform you to become the person that he wants you to become. And then everything else will come back full circle and full picture. And you will be able to say, like, yeah, I go to church every Sunday because, man, I love the Lord. And it's just a part of who you are, and what the part of the reform, if you will, that God has done for you in your life. And I try to people, it's like, listen, churches, I get it, right? Not every church is perfect. And you're right, there are a lot of people in there telling you one thing, but then you'll see those same people who are said, hey, I'm a leader of said church on Friday night at the same club that you go to, knowing that, well, you probably shouldn't be in there, but look, you're not saved yet, right? And as some people would say, I'm not saved yet, so I can still go to this club. And you see the same person who said they were the leader of that church doing the same thing that you're doing, and you're like, well, hold on, okay, if he can do that, then that means I can. So shoot, I'm good, right? And there's no, like you said, there's no consequence. There's no.
Well, we know that there is a consequence when it's all
Yes.
said and done, and the church has a function in the fivefold ministry. It's a medic station for one. It's to help you continue to be saved and to work to get closer. It should be building your relationship with God, not tearing it down or becoming a stumbling block to you. And what I would say is the Bible says that everybody has a gift and a skill that is to be used to God's glory. So when you go to the church, they're supposed to manifest the gift that's in you. Because if you're called to be a deacon, an evangelist, or an elder of the church, you're not going to get that at home looking at the screen of the service. That's why we don't forsake the gathering of the saints, because your gift will never be manifested. And then you have to remember that the Bible says the strong bear the infirmities of the weak. If you're weak and you're at home, how will you ever get stronger? If you're struggling with your flesh with certain sins, how can you ever get better unless you hear a testimony like mine to say, if I can live and live a righteous life, and it's going on 2 years, surely you can too, because the same God that keep me can keep you. So the testimonies of the righteous help other people to become more righteous and say, okay, I can get over this. Then let's pray about it. Let us take this to the throne of grace and say, Lord, this brother is struggling with this particular sin or that sin. That's what you get when you go to church. Even if the church is flawed, which it is, there is no perfect church. And if it is a perfect church, when you join it, it won't be perfect. So the bottom line is, we're honoring God. That's one of the things I talk about here, because there are a lot of people that had church hurts. So one of the chapters in the book is talking about how God feel about. Remember, I love the name of this book. How did we get here, and what does God say about it? Because He has the last say. It is not about your opinion. It is not about what the pastor says. It's not about what your mama said and mama them and all thems. It's about what God say, and you make sure you line up with His will and His word, because He is the one you got to answer to when it's all said and done. So regardless of whether you've been hurt in church, we talk about those things because you do need to talk it out. I do a lot of counseling about stuff like this, getting people to dig deep down inside to get this stuff out so that you can be free to serve God with your whole heart. And if your heart is bogged down with what took place where somebody hit on you in the church, or they mistreated you in the church, and they did all these hurtful things to you in the church, one, God is going to deal with them, because He said, woe unto them that scatter my sheep. God is going to deal with that particular person or persons. Trust me, it will not go unpunished. God punished. He said, revenge is mine, and He is surely to pay it. Trust me. So the thing is, how do you heal from it? You don't sit there and let that stuff eat away at you, because that can keep you from God. And the whole point is for all of us to go to heaven, not to be bogged down with the sin of this world, which the devil would love for you to be isolated at your house, just looking at everything on your TV, online, and you're not getting any stronger. You're not getting any closer to God. You still got that stuff in your heart. You got to let that stuff go. And the only way to do that, trust me, and listen to me when I tell you this, there are some people, even in some of the bad churches, it's still some people in there living right, and they're holy, they're righteous, and they can get a prayer through to God. So God will put these people in your path the same way He put this gentleman here in my path, and here we are.
Absolutely. So when for men, we'll get to dads in a second, but for men, right? I think so. Mark Driscoll. I don't know if you're familiar who Mark Driscoll is. He's a pastor, and he kind of does traveling all the world. He was talking. I saw it was like a 30-second clip, so I can't say in complete context what he's talking about, but I will kind of pick apart some of the things that he said. Not pick apart, but tell you some of the things he said, and I want to get your opinion on them. He mentioned how the church nowadays is very feminine, meaning it's geared towards, it wants to it attracts a lot more women than it does men, and in a way, and this is not to say it negatively. It's not to be negative, right? But essentially what he was talking about was, he goes, this is why you find a lot less men in the church than you do, but you find a lot less men in the church, but you do find a lot more women in the church. And that's great. That is great. But as you said in the beginning earlier, right, men are called to be the leaders of the heads of their households. And so you have men, a lot of these women who are married, and this is my part now. I won't, this, I guess it was a 30-second clip, but you have a lot of women who are married, but they're in the church, but the husbands are, well, it's football Sunday, so I'm going to stay home today, or I ain't going. So for men, how do you get them to get to that point where they say, hey, you need God? Because it's really easy for us to say, hey, this is our testimony, and I believe all men need God, and especially if you're a father, you 100% need God, right? But how do we tell those men? How do we convince them to say, hey, you do need God? And I promise, here's how I can tell you, here's how I can show you.
Well, one, we have to understand we can't convince anybody. The only thing we can do is plant seeds. And that's what the evangelism process is all about. We can talk to believe me, these brothers are the brothers we see in the gym. They'll go to the gym. Mm-hmm. I see quite a few of them. I spread a seed. I tell them about the Lord, and I just keep it moving. God is the one that gives increase. Now, the fact that we have more women in the church a lot of times than men, it's not a special calling. If men don't want to go to church, because the same way women hear the word, men hear the word. But they make that conscious effort to go to it's football Sunday instead of getting a DVR and record the game and watch it after church. So really, we have to ask ourselves, do they really want to be in church? Because there's no special call that's got to win. So, I mean, I understand what the pastor that you were saying, the 30-minute clip, but based on my understanding, it is not like there's a special. Now, the church has become more feminine, not because there's more women. It's because they're out of the will of God. When you got first gentlemen's now and all this stuff, they just out of the will of God. That ain't got nothing to do with what God said in the fivefold ministry. But when it boils down to it, God said, I put before you life and death, you choose. It's a choice we all have to make. Men, young boys, that's why the Bible said, raise your kids up in the way that they should go, that they won't depart far from it. You have to raise your kids as a family. That's what he holds you accountable for. You got to make sure the same way your mama had you going to church and you hated it all that time. But the bottom line is, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. I don't care if church is 3 hours long, 4 hours. Guess what? You know how much Bible study I've been doing? On Monday, it's 3 hours. They do some singing, some eating, some praying. Then we go over the word, and then we do some more singing. Then we leave. That's almost like church on Monday. That ain't got nothing to do with the Bible studies I do on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So this is a joy. If you don't have the joy of the Lord, that means you have the joy of the world. That's how this works. So the question is, are we doing enough to evangelize, to get out there and spread the seed that God can get the increase in these men to get them back in the church? As well as these ladies that are married to these men, the Bible says that she can sanctify the husband. If she live a life and if she's really praying, this is why I thank God my license in ministry first started with Pentecostal and holiness. That's my background. And as I traveled during those 30 years I've been in the military, I started going to Baptist churches. So I got a license in Baptist. So I understand giving you 3 points on our clothes and doing it the way when you talk about theology, Christology, humanetics, apologetics, and all these Semitic terms, when you got all these doctorates and all this education. But I thank God my foundation is spirit first, because without all that, the Pharisees and the scribes had all that.
Yes.
And when Jesus walked up in the spirit, they didn't even recognize him. So they have to be very careful, because you can have and that's one of the chapters in my third book, functionality and muscle memory in the church, in the house of God. Because a lot of people have been doing it for so long, they stop seeking God to the higher heights. That's what I was just telling them in Bible study. God want to continue to take us up higher and higher. Like a father, when your son or daughter start growing up, you want to see the potential. You know what you got, what's invested between your wife and you. You like, wait a minute, your grades don't reflect us. I know you could do better. That's how God look at us. I know what I put in you. I knew you before you were sold up in your mama's womb. I know what I put in you. You don't know. And matter of fact, you ain't living up to what I called you to live up to. So that's why God chastens us, because he know we're better than we know we can be. And until you get out your comfort zone, especially in these churches, and with women, they need to anoint the bed. God said, don't let it be defiled. And I'm telling you, if I was a woman, and thank God I'm not, but if I was married to a Hamanaka that don't want to go to church, man, I'll get that oil and I'll put it on the bed. I'll put it in everywhere. That joker be glowing in the dark. And look, his heart is slowly changing. Next thing you know, that joker preaching. He preaching in the church. He wouldn't even go. Now he doggone ready to start ministry. We don't know what God gonna do. But we have to give God room enough to work and have the faith that he can do what he said he gonna do.
I want to mention or kind of talk about what you said in the beginning, that it's not our job to convince. It's God's job to convince them, but all we can do is plant seeds. And
Correct.
so I have been struggling. Oh, I'm so happy you said that. I have been struggling. So one of the things that's been hard for me is trying to figure out. I have this calling that I do believe to be a pastor. Now, I don't know what that looks like, right? I have no idea what that looks like. I don't know exactly what that means, but all I'm doing is praying and trying to figure it out and trying to be obedient. I tell people all the time, obedience requires action. And I believe it with all my heart. But, one of the things that I've always been struggling with is like, how can this person who Monday through Friday can cuss like a sailor, but then on Saturday, Sunday, whatever the case might be, or even Wednesday nights, go to youth and tell these kids to live their life for God, right? And when I can't even when one Monday to Friday I'm cussing like a sailor, two, I don't even know if I don't feel like I'm capable enough to convince anybody. And there's the word convince again, and I mean that when I say that. I don't feel like I'm capable of convincing anybody to believe in God. I was like, how is this going to be possible? So when you said, no, it's our job to plant seeds, man, a question has been answered that has been living in my head for the last year now. I've been living with that for the last year. So when I say thank you, I appreciate it, because it literally, you said it and I was like, man, there's God. Thank you.
Look, man, it's funny. I speak to people all the time, whether I'm at the gym, because I go 7 days out the week, in the jacuzzi or wherever. And one key thing that they keep saying, this did not happen by coincidence. I've been struggling with this, and here you are. God put you in my life for this very moment. I've heard that 3 different times in the last 2 days by 3 different people. So look, when it comes to a calling, I'm going to show you how God called me to preach. I never went to seminary schools. I have a master's in science and homeland security, but I never took seminary at all. Back when I was in the reserves, I was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and we was going to a small holiness church in Pompano Beach, Florida. And I was working as a bag boy part-time. I was getting it in the reserves. I mean, I was just hustling, just working with my family and going to church. And as I was taking out people's groceries, strangers, Caucasians, African, it didn't matter. They would come up to me, how you doing, Reverend? How you doing, preacher? Out of the blue. I'm like, what the heck? I ain't no preacher. I ain't no reverend. What the heck is this? I mean, just total strangers. And then that following Sunday, the pastor said, we're going to have a seminette and we're going to have 3 preachers. And she named the 2 and she said, I'm going to close. And that was the first time I ever preached. Didn't pick up my Bible to read any fresh scriptures or anything. I wasn't prepared to preach. But the first gentleman got up, and he was a minister, and he was dying. This is back when when you get full-blown AIDS, they didn't have no help for you. You was dying. Mm-hmm. He had full-blown AIDS. So he just stood up, and he gave the topic of the devil is running rapid in the city. And he sat down. And then her cousin got up, her nephew got up, said a few words. When I got up, I was able to take the topic, clean up what said. My mom had tears in her. God just took over. The church was on fire, and I had been preaching for a while since then. That was back in 2002. So when God called you, to whom he called, he qualifies. And if God has called you to be a preacher, one thing I can tell you, he's going to clean up that cussing. You won't cuss. Listen, I shared with you guys, I don't know if I told you the first job I had in the Army was field artillery. I was with the 110 men for the 3.5 years at Fort Ord. Well, that's all we did was curse. You get a bunch of men together like that for 3.5 years in the barracks with all that testosterone. I mean, we cut that. Only every other word was a cuss word. Otherwise, you wasn't a man.
Every other word was
every other word. So I cussed so much, I literally thought I would never be able to stop. Mm-hmm. So the truth of the matter is, I look at what God say. And if God say we shouldn't cuss, then I tell you, like I tell everybody, that is something you take before God. You say, look, God, your words say you don't cuss. And I ran into this preacher man that said that I need to stop. So I need help. Help me. I don't want to cuss. If I'm going to because here's the thing. One of the key things I said when I got here is I'm living a celibate life for almost 2 years now. I'm living a righteous life. One of the things that make a leader, to go back full circle to the topic, is when you live a life before those that follow you and you show concern and care. That's what makes you a good leader. People will follow you through hell when they know that they can count on you and you're going to be there with them, that you won't ask them to do anything you're not willing to do yourself. That's what separates a non-commissioned officer from a sergeant, and a real officer from those that's just wearing bars. That's the difference. And it's the same thing in God's house. God showed me the parallels between the military and the way the military is structured as the way it's God's structured. You can look at the pastor as being the commander of the unit. You can look at the XO as the ex-executive pastor. All those ministers, those are officers. The deacons, enlisted. I'm trying to tell you, God broke the whole thing down. So to be honest with you, if you can be a leader in the military and you love and care for soldiers, that's what a shepherd is. You have to love to care for God's sheep. That's why David was a man after God's own heart. He loved God's people. And when you have that love, love will make you do right. That's why it's the greatest two commandments. Love God with all your heart, mind, and soul and all your might, and love your neighbors as you love yourself. When you do that, you're okay with God when you could do that. But the point is, you not only want to represent God as his ambassador, you want to do it well, because the God we serve is excellent.
Yes.
He don't make mistakes. He dot all I's, cross. So when we get to that place, that's how you ought to want to live. That's why I tell people, I look at God as my father, and I guarantee you, most people look at me crazy when I say, well, Dad, how was your day today? Because that's how I feel about him. And all this stuff, the books that he give me, y'all ain't seen nothing yet. You wait till I start singing and rapping and doing all the stuff God showed me how to do. Y'all going to say, that ain't nothing but God. Ain't no way in the world this 57, soon to be 58-year-old can do the stuff he's doing unless God is with him. That is when you represent. So I would say to you, my brother, you have to get to God in prayer. And one thing, even in my church, we don't practice fasting corporately no more. The Bible says that when Moses was in the mountaintop, when you talked about at the top of Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights.
He didn't eat or drink, people.
He did not eat or drink a thing. God sustained him. God sustained him. And then when you remember, one of the kings, I don't know which king it was, but one of the kings, God was getting ready to destroy him. And when word got to the king, the first thing the king did was make a decree. He said, nobody gonna eat or drink anything for 3 days. Not the animals, not the baby, nobody. We fixing to fast. And the Bible said they put on sackcloth and they put ash on their forehead because he wanted to make sure that they let God know how sorry they was, and God turned away his wrath. Because he was about to tell. But what I'm trying to show you is, when you want to get closer to God, you need to fast. And don't worry about the fact that, I'm taking all these pills. Okay, well, you can still do something, because God is going to look at your intent. If you say, okay, the pill require you to eat at midnight or at night before you take it, then you can skip 2 meals. Cut back on the sweets. Cut back on something. The whole point is, you're making a sacrifice to the body, and to be absent in the body is to be in the presence of the Lord. So when you're not eating, you literally starving the body. That's to kill the body. In order to get rid of some of your fleshly habits that you struggle with, you're going to have to kill the body. Simple. You can't just keep praying, Lord, help me with this. Lord, help me with this. Okay, God hear you, but now what are you going to, how serious are you? I told this to the men. We was in the upper room at one of the church, at Resurrection Baptist Church in Shirts. And one of the doctors, he was a doctor, he said, well, I need to get a prayer through. And the first thing I said, well, how serious are you about getting a prayer through? You need to fast. Push away your plate. Go before God. Get on your knees and go before God and let him know how serious you are about what you're asking him to do on your.
I find fasting so intriguing, because I've never fasted before. In this, I'll be very frank, I've never fasted before, and it's one of those things that I sit there and it's really easy for people to say, yeah, we're fasting, I'm doing all these things. And I'm like, okay, but are you doing it because the church is doing it, like the Daniel fast? You might be familiar with the Daniel fast, right? Are you doing it because the church is doing the Daniel fast? Or are you actually doing it because you have the hope or the belief that it's going to give you closer to God? And so for me, I've never done it because I don't feel my heart has ever been in the right place to say, oh, my intention is to do it to get closer to God, versus my intention is to do it just because as a believer, I'm supposed to do it.
Well, I'll look at it this way, and I'll say it this way. You don't want to do it because you want to get closer to God. That is not the purpose of the fast. the fast, when you're fasting for something, you're really struggling with something within yourself, like cussing, for instance. And if you cuss like a sailor because you're always around military folks, and in the army, there's a lot of folks that curse.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very challenging for you not to say something, back in the same fashion. But when you really start getting closer to God and you want to live a righteous life, the whole point about your being is, I don't want God to be disappointed in me. He's my father. The same way your daughter, when she gets some age, she ain't going to want you to be disappointed in her. Kids honor their parents when the parents pour into them. That's the foundation we was talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with God. God wants to pour into us, but we don't want him to do it because either we don't understand. The Bible says people perish due to the lack of knowledge. We don't understand, or we ain't ready to give up some of the things we enjoy doing. That's just that's it.
That's true.
You see? So if when we start getting serious, and this is why I just got through telling the group that I do Bible study with, I said, look, this is where you are now, but God desired you to be here. So you can see it on the scale that we're down here. God desired you to be here. The only way God is going to get you there is by you submitting to him, and you have the desire that you want to be there. God know your potential, but God ain't going to force it on you. That's why he said, if you knock, I'll open the door. If you thirst, I will make sure you feel. But you got to do it. Jesus did enough. God said, I ain't doing nothing else. I done gave you the breadcrumbs in the Bible. All you got to do is follow them and thirst after righteousness, and you shall be filled. So when you have a prayer problem in your flesh, that's when you show God, look, I need help, God. I'm going to fast. I'm going to make, because it's a sacrifice. Remember, there was a reason. Usually when Esther, remember when Esther fasted? She said, we ain't going to eat nothing. Me and my handmaidens, we ain't going to eat nothing for 3 days and 3 nights. You do likewise. Mordecai, you see what I'm saying? Yeah. So the whole purpose of fasting is when you have a problem and it's serious to you enough to put, because, the Bible says obedience is better than sacrifice. Mm-hmm. So I'm on the side of being obedient because I hate fasting. Listen, look, when I start fasting, you better believe the crap that hit the face. I'm like, oh man, dude, like you've been basing, man. I've been fasting, bro. I got to get.
Oh man, I need it, man. Gosh. So it's like I said in the beginning, right before I even press record, that my intent with these when I have people when we talk Mediocre Dads is to have a conversation. And it's crazy that we go in here with the intent to talk about military leadership, the household and single parenting, but then where we started is not where we ended. And I always tell people, I was like, look, I said, that tells me that means that conversation was great. And we did what we came here to do. And so I'm thankful for you that you came here, had this conversation with me, ministered to me, gave me insight that, I didn't think I would get, and that I've been looking for and I've been searching for. And I have to do better. And I tell people all the time, I'm not perfect, and I'm trying and I'm proving, but I said, I'm happy to see the growth that I've made, because I'm not the man that I was a year ago today.
And that's the thing about it. I sin daily. So I don't want nobody out there to think that I've arrived in any way, shape, or form, because I haven't. The difference between a born again believer and an unbeliever is we are supposed to sin less. Mm-hmm. That is the difference. I don't sin as much as I used to because I'm with Christ. So that is the difference, and that is the scope. That's the high mark in Christ we are all striving for. So do I sin daily? Yes. I ask God to forgive me for my sins, seen and unseen, or commission and omission. Forgive me, because I don't know if I sinned, but just in case I did, I'm asking for forgiveness. But to willfully sin against God is the problem. Yep. And that is why I'm hard on leadership, whether it's on the job, we call it truth to power. I'm the same way in the church, because I feel that as a minister, I tell people I'm a minister not to beat my chest, but it is to say, like Paul told Timothy, do what you see me doing. You don't see me in the club drinking skull and grinding on women and all. I don't even play in the devil's playhouse like that, because I know how I used to be. Well, if God has delivered me from that, God didn't ask me to be an undercover agent to go in there and save a soul. Mm-hmm. The last time I checked, that same person go to the grocery store, go to the gym. I can see him at the gas station. I ain't got to go there, So, it's been a blessing. I thank you for having me. And this was a blessing for me, because I never know what God gonna do.
That is truth for sure. And like I said, guys, Thursdays are Mediocre Dads Bible study. And it's crazy. because it turned into that. It turned into Thursday being the Bible study. And so I'm so happy that it turned into that. I'm so happy that we were able to talk about these things and really just delve into these topics. And, don't worry. Don't worry. He's going to be back, guys. Don't worry. He is going to be back. We talked about it beforehand. He's going to be back, and we're going to have plenty more conversations. Yes. So his book, everything, the link will be in the description. How you can find him. Are you on social media like Facebook, Instagram?
I'm maxed out. As far as friends, you're going to have 5,000. So I got to get followed. That kind of stuff, he's going to help me to get started because I'm not with the social media stuff. But this book is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's everywhere the book is sold. It's got 5-star ratings. It's really thin. It's an easy read, 14 chapters. A lot of what we talked about is in the book. It'll be a blessing to you. We can do book signings. I can do Bible studies at the church. Like I said, it's just a lot of good stuff. So you have any questions, put them in the comment. And like you said, we'll be back and we'll talk about, I love, this book talks about everything. Anything that's a kitchen table topic subject that you talk about, whether it's inflation, what's going on with the government. I believe God is in all things. So that's why I took it this way, where I'm putting the Constitution is in this book. Gun rights is in this book. I diffuse a lot of crazy myths that's out there. So, I believe you'll be blessed by it. You have any questions, we'll answer those questions the next time. But I do plan to come back and share what God gave me that night.
Awesome. And like I said, guys, he will be back, I promise. But hey, that's all I have for you. I appreciate you guys joining us for this episode. Hey guys, being mediocre is a choice. You have to refuse being mediocre. Mediocre Dad's out. Not doing it. It's not doing it. You don't want to stop. Okay, I'm gonna have to press you.